the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners, internet listeners, as well as public radio listeners. I hope you are all well. My name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. And welcome to our show. Today's date is the 22nd of February, 2018. I am in Arizona. Today it is chilly in Arizona. I would say the high today will be about 52 degrees. It got down below freezing last night out in the Sonora Desert. So, not a bad place to be, though. Probably much nicer than it is in some other places, and probably worse than in some. So, I wanted to talk and address something today that I've kind of had a heck of a week trying to get through this revelation through a whole new concept on the way that I approach things has occurred this week. I got entwined into, for lack of a better word, the whole global warming denial deal for a minute. I made a YouTube video on it. Actually gained quite a few subscribers out of that whole incident. And I'm not discounting any of that. You know, and furthermore, my opinions are not necessarily the opinions of anybody else. That would include the Age of Fission Radio or UCY.TV. But I realized what that made me realize is that, oh my God, look at this whole other perspective, we see a whole different thing. And then what is the truth? What's the truth in all of this? You know, what, and for that matter, what really is science? You know, when they tell you the debate is over, what do they really mean by that? Is it now no longer a scientific thing? What exactly does science represent? I think that science represents at this point a preponderance of belief more than anything else in this world. I have to say that there is real science going on, but in certain aspects of science, there is a preponderance of what people believe to be true and what people have been told. You know, basically science starts out as you theorize something, You know, the whole story of how one of the main people that got global warming going, that got Al Gore going, was this Arthur Rebel. And you can find information about him, but you know, he was a scientist that proposed that the oceans may not absorb CO2 at the same rate if it is man-made versus CO2 that is naturally occurring. And therefore you could get a buildup of man-made CO2, and therefore a warming effect could occur. You know, and he went with that, and that is, I believe, how the whole global warming thing really became mainstream. You know, got out of the niche references and got into the mainstream. And indeed, the climate is changing, and it is warming. Is man causing this to happen? We can only assume so. We can only assume that it must be man. You know, but then again, how do we know? How how can we know? We can only know through measurement of the climate. That's really the only, and that's what I've been getting at. And as the quote unquote sane environmentalist, that is what I aim for. I aim for what is the actual truth in the matter, not what is my opinion or this person's opinion or what did that guy say. But that's pretty much all that I'm left with. You know, as a real, truly as a non-scientist, I'm not a scientist. I'm only a spreader of opinion, for that matter. And anybody who doesn't actually go to the college library and read the actual paper that is published in the actual journal, they don't know. They're just going on what somebody said, unless they publish a journal more publicly, or the paper, and especially if it's a peer-reviewed paper. Once somebody theorizes something, then they go back and they test it, and they test it, and they test it, and they try to disprove it. And if it is not provable, then it is considered a valid theory. But it's still a theory. Okay, and that is the basis of science. You know, science proposes, and there is no truth in science. There is only the facts, and there is only the numbers and the logic behind that, and the conclusions that it'll come to as a result of the analysis in an unbiased way of that information. That's what true science is all about. In order to discover something and move forward, you know, the whole discovery and revelation that led to the, for instance, the idea that the sun was at the center of our solar system, you know, and that the planets rotated around the sun, and that we ourselves were a ball that was rotating, you know, was heresy for a long time, but it got proven through scientific validation and through the facts. It could be shown to be valid and not disprovable. Okay? And that is why you still have a certain faction of people who think the earth is flat. Amazingly. You know, they have chosen to not accept the validation of the consensus. And there you go. Is that what it is? Is it a consensus? One of the main topics I got, and this was from Ms. Lonnie Clark, was, but 99% of all the scientists agree on this. And that's what somebody, and I don't disagree with her, and I appreciate her challenging me, but that's what everybody says. They said 99% of the scientists they chose that, and scientists, what they define scientist. Okay, is a doctor, a medical doctor is a scientist. Okay, are you going to ask, maybe 99% of medical doctors might think that this or think that or perform some consensus, but that still doesn't make it a fact or the truth. It's always available and open to challenge. That is part of the deal. And as a side result, the higher the consensus, the more the deniers are treated as heretics. Okay, the higher the consensus, the more it becomes really more and more about just a belief in a religion versus I have so much faith in this thing that can't be disproven that it must exist, and therefore it is like a religion. And how dare you question my assumptions? You know, I see that indeed we are jacking the carbon dioxide level. So what I did was I have been trying to find unpolluted scientific studies, and I've discovered that I really can't do that very well. As a private citizen with only an internet connection and no college affiliation or anything, I can get to the paper, but without an account, I can't actually view the paper. A lot of them, some of them are published online, but a lot of them are not. And so, you know, as far as my personal ability to actually look at the facts as they are versus what the internet is feeding me, I don't really have an ability to do that. But from what I can gain on the internet, and also another individual that I ran into, I think he's sort of similar to me, but he's more cynical. His name is Potholer54, and he's online on YouTube. He has a whole series on global warming, and he really, really explains it well and thoroughly and completely. I can't call him captivating. He's kind of got a droll British accent and a cynical British kind of nature about him, but his facts are right, and he does have affiliations, and he does show you actual studies and stuff that, okay, so they say this, well, this is what the science says. Okay, you can look it up yourself. You know, unfortunately, if you don't have an account, well, you're not going to look it up. If you're not a member of a university or a library or one of those organizations of higher learning or science, then you're not going to be able to get to this information unless somebody like this individual publishes it himself in an open forum. So a lot of science is closed-doored if you don't have the key to get in. And they do that in some ways probably to keep it clean, to keep it pristine. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry isn't throwing everything around like a big mud, you know, trying to prove their point. Because you can find something in science to prove every single point, okay? But the thing is about science, it's not to prove something. It's to disprove something, okay? Once again, see how easy it is to get backwards with science and start to understand that science isn't about proving a point. Science is about disproving or invalidating things and about being skeptical, completely skeptical. And until you can see a preponderance of evidence for yourself, we should be skeptical. And another thing to keep in mind is that governments have a tendency to use science. Governments can use science to manipulate and influence people. And that's another reason, if you think about it, why religion and science have often gone head to head, because religion looks at science and sees exactly what could happen. They saw that, okay, this could become another sort of religion, and we can't have that. You know, we can't have people challenging our beliefs, you know, our creation belief, for instance, you know, that proof it all just happened one day. We can't have somebody challenging that, and I have no personal opinion on that. Okay, I don't even want to delve into or care about that. That is, I'm not a religious person, and therefore, but am I? Am I in my scientific fervor? Am I religious? That I have to question myself. You know, what is right? Well, what is right, from what I can learn, is that yes, the climate is changing. Absolutely. We have gone up in the past century by 0.3 degrees Celsius. So let's see. I'm going to figure out what that is in Fahrenheit. That's 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit in the last century. Increase in temperature on the globe, according to the most accurate estimations that I've been able to see. And I've actually had a chance to look at NASA's raw satellite data. And I was able to look at that and see that, we are warming and the climate is changing. Another argument that got blown apart is that CO2 is such a small part of the atmosphere. Of course, it's such a small thing, doubling it probably won't even have any impact at all. And until I saw a demonstration, okay. And this was a clever way to educate my mind, at least, but I saw a demonstration of clear water, and the guy said, okay, I'm going to put 300 parts per million of ink into this water, and he squirted this X amount of ink into the water, and it got cloudy. I was like, wow, 300 parts per million can be a lot if you really look at it like that. And then he said, now let's do 600, and he put another 300 in. He said, and you couldn't even see through the water anymore. There were so many other particles in the way. I mean, if you put a real bright light through, you could probably still see through it, but you get my point. My point is that, carbon dioxide does have a significant impact, and if we double it, that will have a significant impact. Now being cynical and sane at the same time, I have to say, well, does that mean humanity perishes because of that? No. That may mean that we lose coral reefs. It may mean we lose a lot of different species diversity things. If you have desertification of certain areas, let's say where I'm at, the Great American Southwest, if it stops raining here and dries up, or the whole grain belt of the central United States just dries up and there's no more rain, and we have to pump water out of the ground and we end up running out of that, well, that could definitely create an issue. So a little bit of an increase is, that's enough. If you look at it, if you average that out with what could be, what the most extreme could be, and what the least could be, add 5.5 degrees to the temperature everywhere. That's significant. And that's what we've already done. We assume. Okay. Apparently, nobody's been able to empirically disprove that scientifically. There have been many attempts, and there has also been many tricks pulled on both sides of the coin, both the pro-warming and the pro-not warming people. They have twisted their data. They've cherry-picked their data. They have, and then this is one thing Potholer 54 goes after. He goes after non-scientific scientists, and he says, oh, okay, so you want to quote this study? Well, let's look at what the study says. Oh, well, actually, the study says nothing at all about what you just referred to, does it? Oh, so how did you come to that conclusion? And he breaks it down like that. And you can start to see that both sides of the coin, not just the pro, but the cons, manipulate. And they use science to manipulate in order to gain an advantage in your mind, in the consensus, to make their thing a fact. So what is the truth? So then, as a sane person, what is the truth? As somebody who can't form an opinion because it would be unscientific. That's how I feel. I feel like I can't form an opinion. I just don't have enough data. And that makes me a denier. Okay, if I can't form an opinion, if I can't consent to that, then I must be a denier, but the more I look, the more educated I become, and the more of a consent that I will or that I will give to this, basically. I prefer dealing with situations where there's no denying it. There's no denying anything. There's solid evidence, etc. But this is a situation, folks, where we don't have solid evidence, and either direction, it's mixed. And the numbers have been flubbed, and this has happened, and that's happened, and billions and billions of dollars are flowing. The cost of, I wonder what would happen if I were to Google the cost of climate change. Let's see what they say is the actual cost of climate change. And that would be an estimate of how much money they've spent. Cost of climate change. Let's see. According to the Brookings Institute, this is what they say. The economic cost of climate change is high. An annual $12 billion increase in electricity bills due to added air conditioning, $66 billion to $106 billion worth of coastal property damage due to rising seas, and billions in lost wages for farmers and construction workers forced to take the day off or risk suffering heat stroke or worse. So, okay, that is quite a statement, isn't it? So we're seeing $12 billion increase in electricity bills. Doesn't give you a time frame. I guess that this is just annual. Okay, so yearly it's a $12 billion increase in electricity bills. And somehow, apparently, we are losing our coastlines at a rate of $106 billion a year. So that's what they're predicting. That's what they're saying. Lost wages for farmers and construction workers, and, all of that is opinion. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. If I was just a concerned citizen, which I really am, wanting to know, well, how much does this cost a year? Okay, well, this would tell me that's what, 106 plus 12, $128 billion a year just in the United States in electricity bills and coastal property damage. That's not the actual cost of mitigation and other thing. Paying the cost of climate change. Brookings Institution. Now, they're an individual group that you might think that you can really trust, huh? And I don't distrust them, but I have to say that where's their information coming from? So I'm looking at their article, and I'm not seeing any references to any, according to recent reports. The recent reports take me to riskybusiness.org, an article labeled "The Bottom Line on Climate Change." And for that, it's very propaganda. Let's put it this way. The U.S. economy faces significant from unabated climate change. Every year of inaction serves to broaden and deepen these risks. That's their synopsis. at least they're saying risks. You know, they're not talking about it like it's a given. You know, being risky is not the same thing as, you know, you take a risk every time you drive down the road in your car or walk across the street. So that, you know, give me a break here. You know, both sides of the argument, both sides are full of it. They're full of it. Okay. And so who do I trust? So what I have to do is I have to look at the actual unabridged numbers that I got from NASA's website, which are supposed to be unadjusted. And the NOAA numbers match that. And it shows that we are about 0.3 or 5.7 Fahrenheit degrees warmer today than we were in 1800. Overall, on the average. Which means it could go up to 6.5 or 7 degrees one year, or down 2 or 3 degrees the next year. You know, these climate fluctuates wildly and is very variable. But, you know, each side is using, you know, they're talking about billions of dollars worth of property coastal damage. Wow. And then they give you that again, risky business, which isn't an article at all, just a page that says we face significant risks. So I'm not seeing any links to any scientific journals. I'm not seeing any links to any information other than the opinion that the Brookings Institute is giving on this. So how am I, given no verification and wanting to know the truth, able to verify what they say? I can't on either side of the deal. They're all in it for something other than me. That's apparent. It's absolutely apparent. You know, so what is it? What is actually the true cost of global climate change? If we're looking at billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in coastal property damage, well, that is just amazing to me that they would say there's hundreds of billions of dollars of coastal property damage. You know, I don't even want to try to verify that. You know, I don't. So the bottom line here is this, that when you hear something and you hear scientists say that what scientists, from where, what are their sources? And I've had issues for years about people talking about, well, in a survey they said that and I'm like, well, what survey? Well, I don't know. Well, then how can you quote a survey you don't know? Then you know the results, but you don't know. You know the question, you know the results. You're good on that, but you're not good on where the survey originated, huh? So you're just telling me what your opinion is, and it agrees with the survey. Well, that's fine. That doesn't validate your opinion. A random survey does not do it. Sorry. That's not a good way to make friends, by the way. People get very, very unhappy with you when you doubt their assumptions. You know, they have a tendency to go from liking you fine to thinking you're the biggest pain in the arse around. So basically, keep this in mind. Keep this little talk in mind when you go forward and you hear, well, the scientists say that this or that. That if you want to, you can follow the party line and you can say, okay, 97% of all climate scientists say that we're going to be in a horrible disaster, and that's that. You know, or you can look at it and go, well, you know what, that probably is a bit of an exaggeration, but what is the truth? You know, and again, I recommend Potholer. This guy his job is to throw potholes in pseudoscience with real science involved around climate change. So I recommend that everybody go check him out. So keep that in mind as you go forward. So here we have a release, February 13th, 2018, Tokyo Electric Power Company Holdings Incorporated. It is entitled, and I think this is translated and not very well at that, Situation of Storage and Treatment of Accumulated Water, including highly concentrated radioactive materials at Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station, 340th release, February 13th, 2018. Introduction. This document is to report the following matters in accordance with the instruction of installment and of treatment facility and storing facility of water, including highly contaminated radioactive material at the Fukushima Daiichi Power Station. TEPCO should report to NISA the situation of storing and treatment of the contaminated water in the power station, and the future forecast based upon the current situation has to be reported to NISA as soon as the treatment facility starts in operation. Also, subsequent continued report has to be submitted to NISA once a week until the treatment of the accumulated water in the Central Radioactive Treatment Facility is completed. So what they're doing here is, I don't know how they so badly translate this and why they don't have an English version. But this report is attached to a schematic map of their storage and treatment high-level radioactive waste facility at the Daiichi power plant. And I'm going to walk through this with you a little bit. Hopefully people are aware of basically what you have at Fukushima Daiichi. You have 4 melted nuclear reactors, and all 4 have breach containment, or one of them is actually empty, but still blown up somehow. So you have 3 nuclear reactors with breach containment and melted cores at the same time that they're having to pump water over continuously. They're saying that they're having to add 70 square or cubic meters to 73 cubic meters a day of water to the system, to each reactor. So that means that they are losing 70 cubic meters a day of water that has been literally sloshing around in a melted nuclear reactor core into the ocean or wherever, ground, wherever it's going. And it would be way more than that, but they're pumping out and adding fresh water to try to dilute it perhaps somehow. And the system is rather scary, actually. And let me go through you for a minute with the system. It includes the sources, and they are the reactor building, the turbine building associated with the reactor building. Okay, and we all know that the pressure vessels on all 3 of those I believe they're melted through. And that's where the leakage is probably coming from. So basically they have the oculus, the donut that goes around the reactor, and the floor of the reactor building itself is flooded with radioactive water still today. So they're pumping it from the floor of the reactor building, and as well, some of it's flowing into the turbine building. And spreading the release to there, and so they're pumping it out of the turbine building as well as the trench system, which runs in front of the power plant facility, out and into. Let me zoom in on this. There's a lot of fine print. Here we go. They're pumping it out of the treatment facility, or out of the reactor, and here we go, into what's called a centralized radioactive waste treatment facility process main building. And some of it is going into a centralized radioactive waste treatment facility, quote, high temperature incineration building. So they are incinerating probably if the percentages are correct here, probably 40% of the waste at the